8 shocking facts you didn't know about Sitting Bull, the untold story of a legendary Native American brave. Get ready to be blown away by some jaw-dropping facts about one of the most iconic figures in Native American history, Sitting Bull. His life was far from ordinary, and the truth behind his rise to fame is nothing short of astonishing. 1. He wasn't always Sitting Bull. Can you believe this legendary warrior was once called Jumping Badger? Yes, that's right. Born around 1831 to the Hunkpapa Lakota, what we now call the Dakotas, he started his life with a completely different identity. 2. Nicknamed Slow as a child. Hold on, it gets crazier. Little Jumping Badger wasn't the fierce warrior we know today. He was actually nicknamed Slow by his family. Why? Because of his calm and thoughtful nature. Not exactly what you'd expect from a future chief, huh? 3. Buffalo killer at just 10. If you thought Slow was going to stay peaceful, think again. At just 10 years old, this young boy killed his first buffalo, showing the world his wild side much earlier than anyone could have predicted. Number 4. War hero by age 14. By 14, Slow had already made his mark in battle. Armed with a tomahawk, he knocked a Crow warrior off his horse during a raid. Talk about fearlessness. 5. How he earned the name Sitting Bull. In a mind-blowing twist, after that brave raid, Slow's father did something no one saw coming. He gave up his own name and handed it to his son. From that moment, Slow was no more. The boy became Sitting Bull, the name that would echo through history. This is only the beginning of the electrifying life of Sitting Bull, a man whose legacy defied the odds and shocked the world. Ready for more spine-tingling facts? Stay tuned. The Fearless Warrior, Unbelievable Acts of Bravery by Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull's legendary status was built on acts of raw courage that will leave you speechless. His reputation as a fearless fighter in close-quarters combat was unmatched, and the proof was in the red feathers he proudly displayed. Each feather represented a wound he received in battle, a badge of honor for surviving brutal clashes. But these weren't just battle scars. Collecting red feathers was part of counting coup, an ancient tradition of touching an enemy without killing them. It sounds insane, but letting your enemy live was considered both an act of bravery and an ultimate humiliation for the enemy. And Sitting Bull mastered this art. As his daring exploits spread like wildfire, his name became a battle cry. His fellow warriors would shout, "Sitting Bull, I am he," in the heat of combat, striking terror into their foes. It wasn't just about fighting, it was psychological warfare at its finest. But the most jaw-dropping display of Sitting Bull's defiance came in 1872. During a face-off between the Sioux and the U.S. Army, as tensions mounted over the construction of the Northern Pacific Railroad, Sitting Bull did the unthinkable. In the midst of the chaos, the middle-aged chief casually walked into the open, in full view of the enemy lines, and sat down. That's right, he took a seat, completely unarmed and unbothered. It was a blatant show of disrespect, a silent dare to the soldiers, and an unforgettable moment of pure, unshakable courage. Sitting Bull didn't just win battles, he owned the battlefield, mind and body. Sitting Bull, the ultimate act of defiance that left the U.S. Army stunned. Just when you thought Sitting Bull couldn't get more audacious, he upped the ante with one of the most unbelievable acts of defiance in history. With bullets whizzing by, he wasn't dodging or hiding. He was calmly sitting in the open, smoking a leisurely pipe as if he were enjoying a peaceful afternoon. Inviting others to join him, Sitting Bull smoked his tobacco pipe while completely ignoring the chaos around him. This fearless gesture wasn't lost on his people. His nephew, White Bull, later declared this moment the bravest deed possible. And it wasn't just symbolic. This act embodied the unbreakable spirit of the Lakota chief. But his legendary courage wasn't limited to the battlefield. Sitting Bull rose to become the first man ever to lead the entire Lakota Sioux Nation. Before this, the Lakota bands operated autonomously, but with white settlers and soldiers encroaching on their land, unity was crucial. During the 1860s, as white settlers poured into Sioux territory, Sitting Bull emerged as one of the fiercest resistors to their expansion. His campaigns included daring raids on livestock and surprise hit-and-run assaults on military outposts, even launching several attacks on Fort Beaufort in North Dakota. Recognizing the need for a unified front against the overwhelming force of the U.S. Army, Sitting Bull's uncle Four Horns led a groundbreaking effort to unite the Lakota under one leader. This had never been done before. But Four Horns knew that only Sitting Bull had the bravery, vision, and defiance to lead the entire nation. And so, this unthinkable role was created. Sitting Bull became the supreme chief of all the Lakota bands, a leader like no other in their history. From daring battlefield stunts to uniting a divided nation, Sitting Bull's fearless leadership set him apart as a force the U.S. government could not ignore. His legacy wasn't just built on strength, it was built on unyielding defiance and a vision for the future of his people. Sitting Bull, the visionary warrior who predicted his greatest victory. Sitting Bull wasn't just a fearless leader, he was a spiritual force to be reckoned with. Elevated to his unprecedented role as the supreme chief of the Lakota Sioux around 1869, his influence continued to grow, drawing more hunting bands under his leadership. By the 1870s, even Cheyenne and Arapaho warriors joined his ranks, uniting under his banner of defiance against U.S. expansion. But it wasn't just his military prowess that made him legendary. Sitting Bull was also a Lakota Wachasa Wakan, a revered holy man gifted with prophetic vision. And in June 1876, during a sacred Sundance ceremony, he experienced the premonition that would change everything. In a staggering display of devotion and sacrifice, Sitting Bull made 50 cuts into each of his arms and danced for hours on end. His spiritual endurance pushed him to the point of collapse, and when he fell into a trance, what he saw would shake the future of the United States Army. In his vision, soldiers were tumbling into his camp like grasshoppers falling from the sky, a sign of an impending, overwhelming victory for his people. This vision wasn't just a metaphor, it was a glimpse of destiny. Only weeks later, on June 25, 1876, Sitting Bull's prophecy came true in a way that would shock the world. At the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer led his 7th Cavalry into what would become their final stand. They were decimated by the combined forces of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, just as Sitting Bull had foreseen. Sitting Bull wasn't just a chief, a warrior, or a leader. He was a visionary, a man whose spiritual insight and unwavering belief in his people's destiny led to one of the most stunning victories in Native American history. The untold truth of Sitting Bull at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Sitting Bull's spiritual vision set the stage for one of the most infamous battles in American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Custer's 7th Cavalry charged into the native encampment, unaware they were walking into their doom. Inspired by Sitting Bull's prophecy of victory, the vastly superior forces of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors surrounded the Bluecoats and wiped out Custer's entire contingent of over 200 soldiers in a stunning rout. But here's where the legend gets twisted. Many people believed Sitting Bull was the mastermind behind this overwhelming native victory. Rumors even circulated that he had secretly trained at the prestigious West Point Military Academy. However, the truth is far more surprising. Sitting Bull, 45 years old at the time, wasn't leading the battle. While he was crucial in protecting the camp's women and children during the chaos, he left most of the direct fighting to the younger warriors. The battle itself was far from a coordinated military strategy. Most of the warriors fought in disorganized groups, driven by sheer passion and determination to defend their people. While Sitting Bull's spiritual foresight undoubtedly inspired his people, he wasn't the general some later claimed him to be. Instead, he was the guiding force, the heart of the Lakota resistance, whose vision and presence spurred the warriors to one of the greatest victories in Native American history. The aftermath of Little Bighorn. The true heroes and Sitting Bull's exile in Canada. While Sitting Bull's prophecy fueled the courage of his warriors at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, the true heroes of that fateful day were his nephew, White Bull, and the fearless Oglala Lakota warrior, Crazy Horse. It was Crazy Horse's daring charge that split the U.S. soldiers' lines in two, delivering a decisive blow that sealed their victory. But triumph at Little Bighorn came at a cost. In response to the crushing defeat, the U.S. Army intensified its campaign to subdue the Plains Indians and force them onto reservations. Rather than surrender, Sitting Bull chose defiance. In May 1877, refusing to be confined, he led his people northward, crossing the border into Canada, where he hoped to find sanctuary in the land he called the Land of the Grandmother, in reference to Queen Victoria. For the next 4 years, Sitting Bull and his followers eked out an existence in Canadian exile. But as the buffalo herds, their primary source of food, disappeared, the Sioux were pushed to the brink of starvation. Life in Canada became unsustainable. Under pressure from both the Canadian and American governments, many of Sitting Bull's followers gradually gave up their resistance and crossed back into the United States. The struggle for survival in exile, combined with relentless government pressure, marked a difficult chapter in Sitting Bull's resistance. Despite the odds, he remained the unyielding symbol of Lakota defiance, though circumstances eventually forced his people to make a heart-wrenching return to U.S. soil. The final years of Sitting Bull: surrender, stardom, and tragic end. By July 1881, the legendary Sitting Bull, along with the last remaining holdouts of his people, surrendered to U.S. authorities in North Dakota. After years of defiance, the aging chief was now a prisoner. He spent the next 2 years under guard before being relocated to the Standing Rock Reservation, which would become his final home. But even in captivity, Sitting Bull's story took a surprising turn. In June 1885, he joined the famous Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, a traveling spectacle led by former Army scout and entertainer William Buffalo Bill Cody. For a few months, Sitting Bull performed as part of the show, where crowds came to see the man who had bested Custer at Little Bighorn. Despite the fame, Sitting Bull never felt at ease in this strange new world of entertainment, and after the show's final performance in October, he walked away for good, declaring, "The wigwam is a better place for the red man." Sadly, the end of Sitting Bull's life was marked by growing tension and tragedy. In 1889, the ghost dance movement swept through many Native American reservations, promising the return of their old way of life. This spiritual revival envisioned a messiah who would bury the white man's world and bring the buffalo back to the plains. Though Sitting Bull's involvement in the movement was uncertain, his name and influence made him a target. On December 15, 1890, fearing that Sitting Bull would use his status to ignite rebellion, Indian police came to arrest him at his home on the Standing Rock Reservation. A scuffle broke out, and in the chaos, Sitting Bull was shot and killed by the very people who were supposed to protect him. Sitting Bull's life was a story of defiance, vision, and ultimately, tragedy. From his role as a spiritual leader to his brief stint in show business, his legacy endures as one of the most powerful symbols of Native American resistance in history. The tragic end of Sitting Bull, a turning point in Native American history. Sitting Bull stood as a defiant protector of Lakota culture until his final days. Despite pressure from the authorities, he refused to convert to Christianity and continued living according to traditional customs, including maintaining 2 wives. As the ghost dance movement gained momentum, U.S. officials grew increasingly anxious that Sitting Bull might use it to rally a resistance or escape from the reservation. His reputation as a strong leader and spiritual figure made him a target. On the fateful morning of December 15, 1890, reservation agent James McLaughlin ordered a group of Lakota policemen to arrest Sitting Bull and bring him in for questioning. The officers dragged the 59-year-old chief from his cabin, but their actions sparked outrage among his followers. A crowd quickly gathered, and the tension boiled over when one of the ghost dancers fired a shot, igniting a brief but deadly gunfight. In the chaos that ensued, more than a dozen people were killed, including Sitting Bull himself, who was struck by fatal shots to the head and chest. His death marked the end of an era, the closing chapter of the Indian Wars, and the final blow to Native American resistance against U.S. expansion. Sitting Bull's death was more than just the loss of a leader, it was a turning point in Native American history. His passing symbolized the crushing of indigenous resistance, yet his legacy has lived on. To this day, Sitting Bull is celebrated as a powerful leader who fiercely defended the rights, culture, and freedom of his people. Traditional ceremonies and rituals continue to honor his memory, ensuring that his spirit remains alive in the hearts of the Lakota and Native Americans everywhere. Thank you for watching and listening to the story of this remarkable man, whose courage and dedication have left an indelible mark on history.